At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability. ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
You're listening to the Telltale Channel. In this podcast, why does everybody have a racist uncle? I don't understand. It's like a law of the universe. Let's scroll through my racist uncle's Facebook page and see if we can find some psychotic gems. I love how Jordan Peterson comes out here and confidently states things incorrectly and doesn't even realize he's wrong. It's even funnier when he builds this whole big worldview off of a nonsense premise. My God, how did anybody ever respect this person? Ben Affleck and Sam Harris got into an argument on Bill Maher's show in 2014. I remember because I was watching. Here was the question. Is it bigoted or racist to criticize Islam? Sam Harris says no. Ben Affleck says yes. I couldn't believe how much support each side had. It's honestly an interesting moral problem. Let's talk about it. The creator of Dilbert, Scott Adams, is making a political splash again. Let's talk about what he did the last time he made a big splash. It was bad. He just spouted off some of the most racist things I've heard in a while. If you like what I do and you want to see me continue to do it, don't forget to check out my Patreon. I just finished writing a book titled Was Hitler an Atheist? It talks about religions during the Third Reich and how they work together. Catholics, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Protestants. And I even address the lies told by the evangelical world about Bonhoeffer. It's on Audible and Amazon. I have an uncle, my Uncle Russell, who is out of his head, insane, on Donald Trump. Okay, here we go. He posted something. What has America become? This is from a small Michigan newspaper who had the guts to say what most of the rest of us are thinking. And here's what it says. Editor, has America become the land of the special interest and home of the double standard? Let's see. If we lie to the Congress, it's a felony. And if Congress lies to us, it's just politics. If we dislike a black person, we're racist. And if a black person dislikes whites, it's their First Amendment right. Oh boy. Buckle up. The government spends millions to rehabilitate criminals, and they do almost nothing for the victims. In public schools, you can teach that homosexuality is okay, but you better not use the word God in the process. Oh my God, dude. All right. I can see I'm going to have to address this as we go. Nobody cares if you don't like a black person. I don't like it when you don't like black people. Also, this bit here about you can teach that homosexuality is okay. Who's teaching that in schools? Nobody is teaching that homosexuality is okay. They're not even addressing it. Sometimes a teacher, says, oh, hey, you're gay. Great. Fantastic. So am I, and then you move on with your day. No one is sitting down. There aren't textbooks that say being gay is okay, that you have to read every day or something. And also, this bit about using the word God, people can say God in school. What are you talking about? A teacher cannot impose religious beliefs on students as a representative of the government, effectively. It's called a secular state. I know you don't like the fact that we're secular, but deal with it. You can kill an unborn child. No, you can't. Because before a certain point, say 15 weeks, it's not a child. It is literally a grouping of cells, nothing more. If it were a child, it would be illegal. Under Roe v. Wade, you couldn't do it beyond 20 weeks. Which, by the way, for the record, is before you can tell the sex of the baby or anything. A lot of these anti-abortion people like to say people are aborting babies only if they're boys and it's a male genocide and all this stuff. That's not happening. That was never happening. You can't tell the sex of the baby until 25 weeks or so, and it has always been banned beyond 20 weeks. Unless there's like a medical emergency, like you're about to die. Or like you find that the baby's head is just water. There's no brain in there, it's just water. Hydroencephalus, I think. All right, let's keep reading. So, kill an unborn child, but it's wrong to execute a mass murderer. Well, I mean, I like a little moral consistency here. We don't burn books in America, we now rewrite them. We got rid of the communist and socialist threat by renaming them progressives. We are unable to close our border with Mexico, but have no problem protecting the 38th parallel in Korea. If you protest against President Obama's policies, you're a terrorist. But if you burned an American flag or George Bush in effigy, it was your First Amendment right. These people are so lost. Oh my God. If you protest against Obama's policies, you are not a terrorist. You are totally allowed to do that. 100% fine. But you're going to be criticized. I'm going to call you a terrorist if you say certain things. But I'm not the government. I can have my personal opinion. Back to the First Amendment right again. See how that works? You can have adult entertainment on TV or the internet, but you better not put a nativity scene in a public park during Christmas. Oh my God, dude. Yeah, you can't use the government to further your own religious goals. You're fine with this policy when it comes to Muslims. If Muslims tried to push their religious beliefs on you, you'd have a problem with it because the government cannot promote one religion over another. It's only when you want your religious views pushed on other people. That's when it's a problem for you. We've eliminated all criminals in America. They're now called sick people. Who the f*** calls criminals sick people? What are you talking about? We can use a human fetus for medical research, but it's wrong to use an animal. None of this is connected to reality. Animals are used in lab testing all the time. And also, no fetuses are used in lab testing or in medical experiments or whatever. There's stem cell research where they take an egg cell and a sperm cell and they put it in a petri dish for 3 days. And now you have a grouping of about 30 stem cells that can become anything. Stem cell research saves tons and tons of lives. Like people who have like kidney cancer can regrow parts of their body that they couldn't previously because of stem cell research. But, just completely twisted around, of course. We take money from those who work hard for it and give it to those who don't want to work. We all support the Constitution, but only when it supports our political ideology. We still have freedom of speech, but only if we are being politically correct. Oh my God, dude. This is just propaganda line after propaganda line. You have free speech. You have always had free speech. Not about being politically correct. You're allowed to be the biggest piece of shit on planet Earth that you want to be, and you can't go to jail for it until you break the law, like instructing a hitman to kill somebody, for example, for you. Parenting has been replaced with Ritalin and video games. The land of opportunity is now the land of handouts. The similarity between Hurricane Katrina and the Gulf oil spill is that neither president did anything to help. Bullshit. My God, dude. And how do we handle a major crisis today? The government appoints a committee to determine who's at fault and then threatens them, passes a law, raises our taxes, tells us the problem is solved so they can get back to their re-election campaign. Okay. What has happened to the land of the free and the home of the brave? Ken Huber, Tawas City. So true! Exclamation mark, says this commenter. Get help. Now you know what I'm dealing with in my family with these nutcases. Jesus Christ, bro. That's crazy. Here we go. Here's another. So Trump is mentally ill. And it's a picture of a clown on his face. So Trump is mentally ill. He built a multi-billion-dollar empire that spread across the world. No, he didn't. His dad did. And then he gave it to Donald Trump. What are you talking about? Was able to beat 17 of the best and brightest Republican candidates. Okay. Turns around to beat the most qualified woman of our time, quote unquote, for the presidency. Then, in his first year in office, causes the stock market to climb to heights never seen before in history, lowering unemployment, almost wiped out ISIS, restoring law and order, all while working with the hostile Congress and the media attacking him 24/7. Perhaps we need more mentally ill people in Washington. Oh my God, bro. All right, let's just break this down. Congress was not hostile to Donald Trump for at least the first 2 years of his first term. It was a Republican Congress. They were friendly to him, first of all. Second, almost wiped out ISIS? No. I think maybe the CIA got details on where ISIS leadership was, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. And he basically signed a piece of paper saying, yep, go ahead and pull the trigger. So the CIA did all the legwork to find him, and then all the legwork to pull the trigger to kill him. That didn't defeat ISIS. ISIS still existed after that one guy died. They just filled the hole with a new person. But okay, whatever. Multi-billion-dollar empire, no, his dad built that. Able to beat 17 of the best and brightest Republican candidates. I guess he's implying that Trump is actually the best and brightest. He's smarter than Hillary Clinton, Marco Rubio, Chris Christie, and all of the others. He's saying he's smarter than all of them because he beat them in an election campaign. That's not how election campaigns work. He's still a clown, even if he beat them in a popularity contest. Turns around to beat the most qualified woman of our time, Hillary, for the presidency. She was the most qualified woman of our time. In fact, she's the most qualified person of our time. Hillary was right about everything. In retrospect, just looking back and seeing the things that she said, she was 100% correct about all of it. It's crazy. The first year in office causes the stock market to climb to heights never seen before in history. Yep, and the stock market climbed to heights that it had never seen in history under Obama and under Bush and under Clinton and under Bush Sr. and then under Reagan, under Jimmy Carter, under Gerald Ford, under Richard Nixon, under JFK. It's always higher than the previous time because that's how economies work. I think I named every president chronologically backward. I'm not sure. Maybe I missed one in there. Now it's the highest it's ever been in recorded history under Biden. Had nothing to do with Donald Trump. That's just what stock markets do. Also, stock market is not a measure of an economy or its health. Anyway, I just lie after lie after lie with these people. Why the hell do inmates get free food and school kids don't? Oh, I love it. That was an unexpected take from my uncle. You know how much it costs to house a prisoner for a year? About $40,000. Minimum wage is $18,000, I think, a year, federal minimum wage. Now, I understand that you need, prison guards to watch them or whatever. But the fact that they're watching them en masse in a big group, I'm hesitant to assume that that's the bulk of the costs. I'm going to say the cost is housing and food and medical care and stuff like that. If it costs like $40,000 to house a prisoner, why are people being paid half that? How are people expected to survive on half of that? Really? It says, I want to fire everybody in D.C. in both parties. We need term limits. Get rid of them all and make them live under the same rules they pass for the rest of us. Bobby Jindal. Does anyone think that it's weird that Congress votes on their own pay raises and health insurance packages? Oh my God, he's got one of these stupid chainmail things on his Facebook. Learning from experience, a dog was so faithful that the woman could leave her baby with it and go out to attend other matters. She always returned to find the child soundly asleep with the dog faithfully watching over him. Oh my God, dude, don't do that. One day, something tragic happened. The woman, as usual, left the baby in the hands of this faithful dog and went out shopping. It's funny, because, dogs don't have hands. Anyway, that's just neglect. She would go to prison for that, actually, and she would deserve it. When she returned, she discovered a rather nasty scene. There was a total mess. The baby's cot was dismantled, his nappies and clothes torn to shreds with bloodstains all over the bedroom where she left the child and the dog. Shocked, the woman wailed as she began looking for the baby. All of a sudden, she saw the faithful dog emerging from under the bed. It was covered with blood and licking its mouth as if it had just finished a delicious meal. Of course, the dog protected the baby, right? The woman got angry and assumed the dog had devoured the baby. Without much thought, she beat the dog with a wood to death. What? Why do people post these things? They're so fake. But as she continued searching for the remains of her child, she beheld another scene. Close to the bed was the baby who, although lying bare floor, was safe and under the bed, where the body of a snake was torn to pieces in what had been a fierce battle between the snake and dog, which was now dead. Then reality dawned on the woman, who now began to understand what took place in her absence. The dog fought to protect the baby from ravenous snake. This is stupid. It was too late for her now to make amends because in her impatience and anger, she'd killed the faithful dog. How often have we misjudged people and torn them to shreds with harsh words and deeds before we have had time to evaluate the situation? This is called sin of presumption, presuming things our way without taking the trouble to find out exactly what the situation really is. Wow, the grammar on this. Little patience can drastically reduce major lifelong mistakes. Who are you misjudging right now? Don't think what you think others are thinking. Take time to get the whole truth. Okay. Jesus Christ, that was a mess. Somebody posts, wait. Actually, my uncle posts, why would you even leave a child with a dog at home? That's a good point. I agree. It is dangerous to be right when the government is wrong. Voltaire. My uncle, quoting Voltaire. I love it. Famous atheist. Voltaire was an atheist. Voltaire's the shit. I love that dude. Here we go. Instead of telling someone who rides a motorcycle how dangerous it is, look twice before switching lanes, making turns, or pulling out of a driveway. Stay on your side of the road, especially in corners. Yes, Jagoff. Everybody knows you need to do that. It's still dangerous. Don't follow too closely. Keep your eyes on the road and off your cell phones, so on and so forth. Yeah. Right here. So they want to stick gruesome images on cigarette packs? Why not pictures of obese children on McDonald's packaging? Why not tortured animals on cosmetics products? Why not put the photos of the victims of drunken drivers on beer and wine bottles? Oh, now you're speaking my language. Why not pictures of dishonest, thieving politicians enjoying our money on tax returns? Okay. Although some of you may agree, I'll bet none of you will have guts to share this. I want to see who's brave enough, even if you're not a smoker. Oh my God, dude. He is a smoker. My uncle is. So stupid. Immigrants threatening your way of life? That must be tough. And it's a picture of a Native American. That's funny. Again, ties to Native American ancestry. That's why he posts that stuff. I mean, he's always been like completely out of his head, drunk on Republican nonsense. So, yeah, it's really sad because he knows what I do. He knows about my channel and everything, but he doesn't like anything about it because it's not far-right extremism. So, yeah, that's crazy. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. Absolutely nuts. I'm sure you guys got a few uncles like that too. Cosmetic companies do not test on animals. Well, most of them don't. Yeah, and it's obviously like a lot more complicated than that. It's a lot more complicated than he's portraying it. You know, some of those things I could get behind, but a lot of that's just nonsense. We'll be right back. Don't forget to check out my Patreon. Also, take a look at my website, owenmorgan.com. I just finished writing a book titled Was Hitler an Atheist? It talks about religions during the Third Reich and how they work together. Catholics, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Protestants. And I even address the lies told by the evangelical world about Bonhoeffer. It's on Audible and Amazon. This is Jordan Peterson. I don't know when this came out. When this came out, this is 7 years ago. I'm not sure if this is after he's famous or before. I think it's after he got famous, but it wasn't like, he wasn't gigantic yet. He talked about World War II and the Nazis and what they did, so I want to listen to what he had to say. I happen to know a lot about this subject, so let me see if I can validate what he's saying, see if he's telling the truth or just making shit up as he goes.
So here's what you should have done if you were a Nazi and you wanted to win the war.
See, he could have solved it.
You should have enslaved the Jews and the Gypsies and had them work, right?
Okay, that is exactly what they did.
You should have had them work for the benefit of the victory, and then if you wanted to, you liquidate them afterwards.
Okay, is this a joke? Is he having a laugh at me right now? This is literally exactly what they did. I thought he was going to tell us how Hitler could have won World War II.
That's the logical thing to do if you want to win.
Uh-huh.
And we assume that Hitler wanted to win.
Uh-huh.
But that's not a very intelligent assumption. Why would you assume that? He wasn't exactly a good guy. So why should we assume that he was
Why would we assume that he doesn't want to fucking die?
Exactly a good guy. So why should we assume that he was aiming at the good that he was promoting, even in his own terms?
I don't know what that means.
Right? The glorious, everlasting Third Reich, right? That'll rule for 1,000 years and be a bastion of civilization and music, because that's the sort of thing he purported to be interested in.
Well, what, you don't think he was interested in music? No, he was interested in like arts, music, sculpting, and all kinds of stuff. I'll tell you what, this is for historical kind of knowledge, so I'm comfortable doing this, but there's a sculptor, there's a famous sculptor, got famous in Germany. Dude's name was Arno Breker. He was Hitler's basically his favorite sculptor, his favorite artist in Germany, because he sculpted like the Aryan form, quote unquote, with like unnaturally large muscles, and it was really weird. And he had a thing about sculpting twig and berries. I don't know why he liked doing that so much. Like, for historical knowledge, I'm comfortable. I'll cover this in the final product, but yeah. I don't know why he was so obsessed with sculpting twigs and or berries. It was like a lot. It was more than it should be. So yeah, he was, look, why? I'm sorry, guys. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not doing it. Why? Hitler was really into the arts is the point, generally. Sculpting, drawing, painting, music. Personally, I thought that was kind of a chick thing to do. I didn't know that art was manly. Peterson only got famous due to his bigotry being revealed in the wake of Canadian Bill C-16. He profited off hate. 100%. And he was wrong about C-16. He was incorrect.
Well, so what do you do with the Jews and the Gypsies? Well, round them up, fine. Enslave them, fine. You don't kill them. You certainly don't devote a substantial proportion of your war resources while you're losing to accelerate the rate at which the extermination is taking place.
It is so stupid, dude. All right, let me tell you what happened. When Hitler took control in the earliest days, we're talking 1933, he started what was called the T4 program, where the Nazis would go to doctors' offices and tell the doctors, you need to give us a quota of kids to kill. Give us 50 kids per month or something that are disabled and that are not fixable. And if that's the case, put a minus sign on their chart. And if it's not the case, put a plus sign, and we'll have somebody go through the charts and find all the minus signs, and we'll bring a van up front and pick them up, and we'll kill them, basically. They didn't actually say that they were going to kill them, but that's what they were doing. And it didn't take long for everybody to realize that that's what was happening. People ask, like, how much did the population know? Pretty much everything. They knew pretty much everything. But knowing was a danger to you. You could be tortured or killed for knowing what the Nazis were up to, for knowing that they were torturing people or taking children and killing the disabled or whatever. You could be tortured or killed for that. So they denied it. They denied it until they believed that they didn't know. Anyway, they would drive these vans up and they would go to the parents and they'd say, we're taking your kid to a camp, a rehabilitation camp, where they'll get better and we'll teach them to like walk and stuff like that. And then they just never come back. They just disappear. The gassing started with putting people inside of vans and piping the exhaust into the window, closing the window and locking the doors. Takes 15 or 20 minutes for people to die that way, they discovered. That was before they had the camps or anything. That's how the T4 program started. That's how like the execution stuff started. Started with disabled kids. Eventually they started a work camp kind of thing. Like they built the concentration camps like really early on. And the concentration camps were not necessarily death camps. They were different, although the death camps were also concentration camps. But concentration camps are just where like large numbers of people were concentrated. And at these concentration camps, they had everybody there work. It'd be breaking rocks in the hot sun, for example, or whatever. Building like munitions, building tanks and stuff like that. And people talk about how well the economy was doing under Hitler. That's why. The economy was built on slave labor is the point. And the hang up with Peterson is probably coming where he doesn't realize like how it all kind of played out. You can just learn about it in the book Night by Elie Wiesel, I think is his name. He describes his experiences at Auschwitz. He was taken there on a train with his dad, and I believe his mom and his sister, I think, were there too. Somebody walks by. You know what? Maybe his mom and sister were taken separately. Anyway, you should read the book and find out. But he and his dad are standing in line there. They get out of the train, and they're standing there, and somebody walks by and says, tell him you're 16 or something, who just whispers to him. and there's no time to ask questions. So he describes standing there as an SS guard comes out and another guy in like fully decorated, like seemingly very influential person walks out and says, he starts going down the line and he says, left, right, and he's pointing to people and telling them to go left or right. If they go left, it's to the crematorium. If they go right, it's on work detail. He and his dad were both sent to work. The people that are too young, too old, or inadequate for working were sent to die. Elie Wiesel, specifically, he survived, but his dad did not. His dad died there next to him weeks before the camp was liberated. And the dad was calling for Elie, saying something, I don't remember, come here, I want to talk to you, or something like that. And Elie stayed. He didn't move. He couldn't move. And he blames himself for that. He's still alive, to my knowledge. He's really old. I mean, he was a little kid when he was in Auschwitz, but he beats himself up over that every day, according to his book. That's what happened. Hitler was killing older people, women, and children, and putting the men to work and torturing them terribly. So Jordan Peterson is just out of it. Like, he has no idea what's going on. Let me give you a piece of advice there, Jordan, if you're watching. Probably not, but just in case. Don't talk about subjects that you don't know anything about.
To accelerate the rate at which the extermination is taking place, because that's a bit counterproductive, unless what you're aiming at is the maximum possible mayhem in the shortest period of time. Well, so what happened as the Germans...
He didn't want mayhem. He wanted to kill the Jews and take Europe.
...started to lose the war. Did Hitler lose faith in his own ability? No, he believed that the Germans had betrayed him with weakness. And so...
That's true.
He was perfectly willing to accelerate the rate at which Germany was losing the war.
That's not exactly true. No, that's not true. Near the end of the war, it's clear that he had already lost. There's no way to win. He diverted resources toward the concentration camps to kill the Jews so that the Allies wouldn't have... I shouldn't even say Jews. It was a lot of people. Jews, Jehovah's Witnesses, Roma, or what they called Gypsy at the time, and many others. Political prisoners, criminals. Hitler wanted to kill them all so the Allies didn't have a resource in slave labor. So he diverts resources to the concentration camps and instructs the guards to kill all of the prisoners. But they didn't have the resources. They couldn't. It would take too long, too much ammo, too much effort. They tried, but some concentration camps were like in the middle of it when they were liberated. I mean, there were thousands of people in these camps and not that many guards. So some of them were liberated like while they were trying to do this. And the guards caught wind that the Allies are coming. So they put on prisoners' clothing and slip out in the middle of the night. For example, some of the guards didn't have time to slip out. Some of them stayed and got beat to shit by the prisoners. And Americans just kind of turn around, put a cigarette in their mouth and light it, and just stand there smoking, looking out over the field while all this shit was happening. So, anyway, Hitler at the end didn't care about the German people, and his reason for diverting resources was to rob the Allies of a resource. And at the end, he actually said he didn't care about the German people. The only ones left were weak. They were just the weak ones. The Aryan race died in the war. The only ones that are worth anything died in the war. So he didn't care what happened to the German people.
And so when Hitler and his minions had the choice, here's the choice. You can suspend your unnecessary demolition of people, win the damn war, and then pick it up afterwards. Or while you're losing, you can just accelerate the mayhem, even though it's counterproductive.
That's not true.
It's like, what'd they pick? Well, they picked to accelerate the mayhem. And so to me, there's an old psychoanalytic idea. I think...
He is so full of shit. He has no idea what he is talking about. Don't talk about subjects that you're completely, unknowledgeable about. As a professor, as an authority figure, providing information to young students. He is such a joke.
I think this was derived by Jung.
Wait, why can't I hear it? Got it. Hold up. Okay, here we go. Sorry.
And so to me, there's an old psychoanalytic idea. I think this was derived by Jung.
Carl Jung, he had a couple of interesting ideas, but he was kind of a nutcase.
If you can't figure out what someone is doing or why, look at the outcome and infer the motivation. If it produces mayhem, perhaps it was aiming at mayhem.
Perhaps, but not most definitely. And again, his whole thing is based on nonsense. There wasn't mayhem. There was slave labor.
Now, you have to use that dictum carefully. If someone's irritating you, maybe it's because you're irritable and you should sort yourself out, but maybe it's because they're actually aiming at irritating you. And that's the actual motivation. So perhaps not, but it's another tool in your analytical armament. So
why doesn't he use a different example, one that's not fictitious?
And so you see, well, and this is the thing about warfare that's so interesting about because you can attribute it to territoriality.
Territoriality, is that a word? Territoriality. It is a word, apparently. The act of establishing and defending a space or territory of one's own. Kind of like anti-disestablishmentarianism. There's like 6 negatives in there.
You can attribute it to a war for resources. That's what I would say, wretchedly simple-minded economists presume. People fight over scarce resources. It's like, hey, we're a little bit more sophisticated than that. And first of all, what resources are you talking about? The bloody Inuit had nothing. They lived perfectly well. What did they have? Snow and seal blubber. People can live in unbelievably deprived conditions. And
I don't understand what point are you trying to get to? What does this mean? Is he just like saying random words that mean absolutely nothing?
Seal blubber. People can live in unbelievably deprived conditions.
No fucking shit.
And so the idea that there are natural resources that we fight over because there's a shortage of them is a pretty oversimplified view of human beings. It's like, well, why do people fight? Well, maybe they fight sometimes for good reasons, but very, very frequently they fight for bad reasons. And those bad reasons are personal as well as sociocultural and economic.
Dude, what point is he trying to make? I'm so lost.
If you were a Nazi prison guard, for example, whatever pathologies you were carrying around in your destructive little soul, whatever element of Cain was deeply embedded in you, had
whatever element of Cain,
the opportunity to be manifest fully at every moment of your waking existence, right? You had these people who were completely beholden to you with no rights whatsoever, to whom you could do whatever your evil little heart determined.
Okay, you've described Nazi Germany. Now, what's the point?
Think, well, maybe that was a motivation for putting them there to begin with. And all the cover story about, well, we're trying to build the Third Reich and we're trying to stabilize the state and we're trying to do all these good things. Maybe that's just a cover story for the real motivation, which is nothing but what? The construction of death camps that killed 6 million people. How about that? And the obliteration of 120 million people on the planet.
Bro has no idea what he is talking about.
And the leaving of Europe in ruins. Maybe that was the motivation. Or are we going to attribute to Hitler the highest possible motives? Say, no, it's an archetypal manifestation of Cain.
Why does he keep doing this? Why does he use needlessly big words? Archetypal manifestation of Cain. He could have just said, no, he's imitating Cain. Check this one out. It's another shorter one.
There's a book called Ordinary Men that's a lot like that. I don't think I've mentioned that to you.
Ordinary Men is an interesting book. It's a good book. And as far as I can tell, everything in it is accurate as far as like interviews go and things. But it incorrectly portrays police battalions as being like not indoctrinated, just normal people when they were not. The battalions that Ordinary Men was talking about were radical, extreme. They were the most insane of the most insane. So I would say that book gives people an incorrect perspective, an incorrect impression of what happened, and should be viewed skeptically.
Ordinary Men, that's a lot like that. I don't think I've mentioned that to you before, but Ordinary Men is a book about, it's the best book of its type.
No, it's not.
Maybe it's the only book of its type.
No?
It's possible, but it's plotted much like Breaking Bad in some sense. It's a story about these German police.
It's not a story. It's a book full of interviews and analysis of those interviews of a police battalion. Police Battalion 101 or something, I think. I've read it multiple times. It's good, but it does not represent reality at the time.
In the early stages of World War II. And they were guys who were old enough to be raised in Germany really before the Hitlerian propaganda.
Why Hitlerian? Why not just Hitler's propaganda? Needlessly confusing words.
Came out in full force. You know, if you were a teenager, say in the 1930s, you were going to be pulled right into the propaganda machine, and maybe you were part of the Hitler Youth, and like you were raised in that, you know. But if you were older, then you were raised before that, and you're not as amenable to propaganda once you're older than about, well, I would say about 22 or something like that. It's pretty young, actually. If you're
Jordan Peterson is pretty good with psychology, with psychological subjects. He's pretty accurate with a lot of it. Everything else is complete nonsense. I'm inclined to believe him on this one specific point, but I'm skeptical of literally everything out of his mouth.
You're going to make a soldier, you have to get a soldier young. Because
it's a propaganda from the people that live on the planet Hitleria. That makes sense. Hitlerian, yeah. Hitlerian propaganda from Hitleria.
It's pretty young, actually. If you're going to make a soldier, you have to get a soldier young. Because once people are in their early 20s, say, they already have their personality developed. Anyways, these policemen were sent into Poland after the Germans marched through. And you know, it was wartime, and there was this hypothesis in Germany that the Jews in particular were operating as a fifth column and undermining the German war effort because, of course, the Germans blamed the Jews and a variety of other people for actually setting up the conditions that made the war necessary. And
that's correct.
So when the police were
it's called the stab in the back myth, and it was a conspiracy theory from the time. World War I and World War II were really the same war. They were just a group of countries pushing for new territory, effectively. World War I, Germany, it was started by Austria, south of Germany, but Germany saw the opportunity when World War I started and invaded, I think, Luxembourg and Belgium. It's the two countries between Germany and France. I always forget if it's Belgium or Bavaria. I get them mixed up. One's a German state and one is a state next to Germany. Anyway, World War I was waged to gain territory, or Germany was waging it to gain territory, and they lost. They simply lost. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You just weren't good enough to do it. But Hitler couldn't rationalize how Germany lost. Others were mongrel armies. Ours are strong Aryan armies. The Aryan myth came about in the late 1800s. It was really popularized heavily in the early 1900s, before World War I. So this whole Aryan mindset already existed long before World War I even started. So there was no way that Hitler could possibly see that the strong Aryans would be defeated by the mongrels. So he defaulted to it. Must have been a threat from the inside. And as we know, Jews control everything and are like, they're the bankers. They have all of the money, and they send us to war to die for no reason. So they must have been behind the defeat of World War I. The only way Germany could have lost the war is if there was somebody on the inside sabotaging us. The stab in the back myth. It's nonsense, obviously. So yeah, it sounds like that's what Peterson's referring to here. I doubt he even knows what it is, truthfully.
You know, it was wartime, and there was this hypothesis in Germany that
conspiracy theory, not hypothesis.
The Jews in particular were operating as a fifth column and undermining the German war effort because, of course, the Germans blamed the Jews and a variety of other people for actually setting up the conditions that made the war necessary. And so when the police were sent into Poland, they were also required to make peace, roughly speaking. And so they started up by...
What? They were sent to make peace in Poland? What are you talking about? Germany invaded Poland off of these trumped up claims that Germans were being persecuted in Poland. They even convincingly faked some events, Germany did, where one guy got his arm broken by somebody. It was very clearly a setup from Germany, but that was their justification. That's all they needed. That's why they invaded, because Polish were abusing the German terribly. Anyway, I don't know what Peterson's talking about here.
Required to make peace, roughly speaking, and so they started out by rounding up all the Jewish men between 18 and 65 and gathering them in stadiums and then shipping them off on the trains. But that isn't where they ended. They ended in a very, very dark place. I mean, these guys...
No fucking shit. Really? They did? First time hearing of it.
...were going out in the field with naked pregnant women and shooting them in the back of the head by the end of their training.
He's talking about specific things from ordinary men. Reading one book does not mean you know everything about the era, Jordan. They were doing that, yes. But again, you shouldn't take that as like an example of, a quintessential example of the people of the time.
And what's really interesting about that is that their commander told them that they could go home at any time. So this is not one of those examples of people following orders. And the reason they didn't, roughly speaking, there's many reasons, but one of the reasons they didn't is because they didn't think it was comradely, so to speak, to leave the guys they were working with to do all the dirty work and run off. And that's really an interesting fact, because in different circumstances, you wouldn't think about that as reprehensible, right? You'd think, well, that's part of teamwork and under rough circumstances, and that's at least in part how they viewed it. And they were also made physically ill multiple times, physically and psychologically ill by the things that they had to do, but they kept doing them anyways.
That's true. They did not, in the book, in the Police Battalion 101 or whatever it was, they didn't want to do that stuff. But again, I say that's not like the norm. That's not the norm. That's not what most police battalions were dealing with. They had, the police battalions were instructed to just pull the trigger, just en masse, gather Jews up from a region or from a town or whatever, bring them out into the forest, have them dig a big ditch and line them up 10 at a time and pull the trigger. That's what they were told to do. And it was such a brutal and ugly and horrific job that they had to get drunk beforehand to be able to handle it. They had Hiwis, was what they called, HIWI, I believe. They were basically local volunteers that came in with guns and, did it right alongside the Nazis. So anyway, yeah, I guess what he's saying is kind of true in this specific part.
Ill by the things that they had to do, but they kept doing them anyways. So it's one step at a time. And that's the thing, is that you end up in very bad places one step at a time. So you got to watch those steps.
Yeah, he doesn't know what he's talking about. You shouldn't talk about things as an authority figure unless you know what you're saying. Just an embarrassment. Tell me what you think about it in the comments. We'll be right back. Don't forget to check out my Patreon. Also, take a look at my website, owenmorgan.com. I just finished writing a book titled Was Hitler an Atheist? It talks about religions during the Third Reich and how they worked together. Catholics, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Protestants. And I even address the lies told by the evangelical world about Bonhoeffer. It's on Audible and Amazon. Back in 2014, there was a Bill Maher segment where Sam Harris and Ben Affleck got into it, like, live on air. And it was this big thing. Oh my God. It almost like sparked the anti-SJW movement. Didn't really spark it, but it added fuel to the fire at the very least. It existed before. I want to listen to it. It's like the anti-woke movement of 2014. Ben Affleck comes at Sam Harris for criticizing Islam. I just want to see how it holds up today. Oh, by the way, let me introduce. Sam Harris is a famous atheist. I think he's a neuroscientist. He's written a bunch of books. Letter to the Christian Nation, Morality, and some other things. So yeah, he had just written a book about Islam, I believe, at this point, and claimed that Islam was very destructive. And generally, I agree, but just listen to what he says.
So the other thing we want to talk about, of course, is that you and I have been trying to make the case, I think, I have anyway, that liberals need to stand up for liberal principles. This is what I said on last week's show. Obviously, I got a lot of hate for it. But all I'm saying is that liberal principles like freedom of speech, freedom to practice any religion you want without fear of violence, freedom to leave a religion, equality for women, equality for minorities, including homosexuals. These are liberal principles.
Like, why? I don't know. Yes.
Why choose a Sleep Number smart bed?
Can I make my side softer?
Can I make my side firmer?
Can we sleep cooler?
Sleep Number does that. Cools up to 8 times faster and lets you choose your ideal comfort on either side, your Sleep Number setting. And now it's our lowest price of the season on our top-selling i8 smart bed. Your best savings, plus free home delivery with an adjustable base. Exclusively at a Sleep Number store near you. All Sleep Number smart beds offer temperature solutions for your best sleep. Learn more at sleepnumber.com.
People stand up for that. They were standing up for that like 10 years ago, okay? I don't understand what he's complaining about here exactly.
That liberals...
Are people clapping for this? Are you serious? Everybody has always done this. Like,
applaud for, but then when you say in the Muslim world this is what's lacking, then they get upset.
Yeah. Well, liberals have really failed on the topic of theocracy.
Yeah, let me try to draw out my take on this and why I think this is a problem. The UK has a lot of Muslim immigrants and a lot of Muslim refugees. Like, our southern border has people from South and Central American countries coming in as refugees and applying for asylum status because they're war-torn areas. You know, Venezuela and Mexico, some areas in Mexico and stuff like that are bad areas, dangerous. So they come over the border and they apply for asylum. And when they get here, they're demonized relentlessly by the right, by Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell and every other scumbag on the right. They're all demonized by them. In the UK and in Europe more broadly, they have the exact same thing, except it's for Muslims rather than just Mexican or South Americans. The people in the UK specifically are like the far right have just vile hatred for anybody that's Middle Eastern. I'm not saying all people in the UK, obviously. I'm saying the far right have vile hate for Middle Easterners, for people who are Muslim or people who speak Arabic or whatever. Just disturbing what they say and do. And there isn't really a good colloquial word for hating somebody based on just their like beliefs, that their beliefs are separate from you. The actual term is bigotry. Like, racism is hating somebody based on their skin color. Sexism is hating or like mistreating somebody or whatever based on their gender. And bigotry is doing so based on their beliefs. But bigotry is kind of a catch-all term that people use nowadays. So anyway, people have defaulted to using the term racist when talking about how the far right treats Muslims in the UK, because it's just easier. It's a shorthand. We all know that, obviously, Islam is not a race. But a lot of people, you know, come at others and say that it's not racist and all of this stuff. Like, this is the battle between left and right that's being waged in the UK, and we know nothing about it over here because we're not even paying attention to that. We got our own things going on with people, you know, hating immigrants, threatening to round them up and put them in concentration camps. So anyway, walk into this with that knowledge in mind. Sam Harris writes a book about Islam being destructive. I'm on board. I think Islam is destructive. I think it is bad. And I would like to decrease the number of adherents. I want to get people to realize that this is a destructive religion. I don't think that's controversial. It shouldn't be controversial. But you also have to walk into the conversation understanding that there are like a lot of people on the far right in the UK that are vile, hateful, monstrously evil scumbags looking for an opportunity to hurt people that they don't like.
Really failed on the topic of theocracy. They'll criticize white theocracy. They'll criticize Christians. They'll still get agitated over the abortion clinic bombing that happened in 1984. But when you want to talk about the treatment of women and homosexuals and free thinkers and public intellectuals in the Muslim world, I would argue that liberals have failed us. And the crucial point of confusion...
Yeah, it's because people don't want to be associated with the far right, so they just don't talk about it much, which I get. But I have no problem with talking about Islam and how destructive it is. I just, it doesn't really affect my life much. I know it affects a lot of others' lives, so I'll have people on to talk about it with me or whatever, but it's just somebody else's fight. I'll support them in their fight, but I'm not going to fight it myself.
The crucial point of confusion. Yeah, thank you.
Thank God you're here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the crucial point of confusion is that we have been sold this meme of Islamophobia, where every criticism of the doctrine of Islam gets conflated with bigotry toward Muslims as people.
Right.
That is what's happening in the UK, actually. It's just vile, hateful garbage that's masked under a mask of reasonable criticism. It's like I always say, Christian nationalists, they have a position, right? And a goal. They have a goal. They want to force people to stop looking at adult entertainment, to stop taking birth control, to stop getting divorced. And they want to force people not to get divorces or take birth control or whatever. But if they came out and said that, they wouldn't be very popular. So they find a common ground that everybody can agree on, and then they try to nudge you over. For example, Kirk Cameron talking about how he just wants to protect children, just girls in girls' bathrooms, 6-year-olds. And there's a big trans man that walks in and he's, going to take advantage of the kids in the bathroom. Kirk Cameron didn't care about people taking advantage of children when it was Catholic bishops and priests doing it and moving them from parish to parish to protect them from prosecution. He doesn't care about that issue. He has always cared about hurting trans people. That's not happening. Trans people are not doing that. Nobody is doing that. If he just laid out his real reason for wanting to push these policies, nobody would agree with him. If he just said, I just f***ing hate trans people and I don't want them in the bathroom anymore. I don't want them in any public bathroom. In fact, I don't want them in public anymore. If he said that, nobody would be on board. He's got to weasel his way in. And that's what a lot of people in the UK do with Islam. Again, 100% totally justified criticisms that I stand with you on. But then there's a subset of the population that's looking for an opportunity to work their way in, to weasel their way into this conversation with the intent to hurt other people, and solely for that.
Toward Muslims as people.
Right.
And that is it's intellectually ridiculous.
Is Sam Harris not aware of this, is what I'm wondering? Is he unaware that people are doing this on the right in the UK? I don't know.
Really ridiculous. Even it gets
so. Hold on. Are you the person who understands the officially codified doctrine of Islam?
I don't know what that has to do with anything.
So you can say, "This is." I think
I'm actually well educated on this topic.
I'm asking you. So you're saying if I criticize you're saying that Islamophobia is not a real thing. That if you're critical,
I don't think he said that, but okay.
Critical of something.
Well, it's not a real thing when we do it.
Right.
Okay, that was a really stupid thing to say.
Do it.
Right.
Well, no,
it really isn't.
I'm not denying that certain people are bigoted against Muslims as people. And that's a problem.
Big of you.
But
why are you so hostile about this?
It's gross. It's racist.
It's not. But it's so nuts.
It's like saying those stateless, shifty Jew.
You're not.
All right, so this is Ben Affleck set himself up for criticism here. He said it's racist, and it's because that word is a shorthand, like I said earlier. We all understand that it's not actually racism because Islam is not a race. Everybody is aware of that. But it is basically racism. It's in the same kind of vein, right? It's bigotry. When the far right does it. Like when they intentionally weasel their way in. It's bigotry. It's effectively racism regardless of race. But interestingly, the far right in the UK, they only ever really target like Arabic Muslims. They don't really target any other kind, so there's that. Anyway, the conversation that Sam Harris and Bill Maher are having right now is not bigoted, in my opinion. It's a completely normal conversation that needs to be had. And I think Ben Affleck got way too sensitive about this. Maybe he spends a lot of time in the UK and sees this same kind of racially charged garbage
It's like saying the stateless, shifty Jew.
You're not listening
Absolutely
to
not.
what we are saying.
You guys are saying if you want to be liberals, believe in liberal principles like freedom of speech, like we are endowed by our forefathers with an inalienable rights, like all men are created equal.
Ben, we have to be able to criticize bad ideas. And
of course we do. No liberal doesn't want to criticize bad ideas.
Okay, well, that's literally what they're doing. They've only been doing that this whole time, so I'm not sure.
But why is the mother lode of bad ideas?
Jesus.
So we have ideas like blasphemy.
No.
I don't understand what Ben Affleck's problem is with this. It is a religion that is full of really bad ideas. When I saw this originally, I was kind of an anti-SJW at the time. I was an anti-woke type of person. I leaned heavily anti-woke. I was still on the left, but I was anti-woke, what we called anti-SJW at the time. And I remember siding with Sam Harris here and not understanding what Ben Affleck was complaining about. I didn't actually know that this was a problem in the UK at the time. Now I know, of course, but I'm still kind of in the dark here. Islam is a set of really bad ideas because it's not worse than other religions if you look at the text, all evil. Yeah, but we're talking about more than just looking at the text. We're talking about how it's implemented first. And second, I totally agree. Yes, they are all bad in a lot of ways. Like Christian nationalism is horrific and terrible. And so is Islamic nationalism. And so is Jewish nationalism. Nationalism generally tied to a religion is bad. Like far-right religious belief is bad, I would say. And the further right you go, the more fundamentalist you get, generally. So every religion has some bit in there about women, not being allowed to whatever. But here's the thing. Pastors, religious thought leaders generally, they have a set of moral principles, beliefs, and ideals that they reach for, and they look through the Bible to find the basis for those beliefs. They're not going back and looking through the Bible for how God feels about being gay. They have an idea about what they think, and they're looking for places where God would agree with them. And the fact is, a lot of holy books are gigantic. Thousands of pages written by dozens of authors over hundreds of years, thousands of years sometimes. There's a verse in there for literally anything. It's impossible to not cherry pick the Bible or other holy texts because it's so full of like a diversity of ideas. But just like look at modern day, what we're dealing with today. Pastors in the Christian nationalist movement today are vehemently anti-gay. Like they talk about gay marriage all the time, right? But there's just as much support for hating gay people in the Bible as there is for slavery. It's even in the same spots. Jesus didn't encourage people to hate gay people just because they're gay. Didn't say anything about not getting married to your gay partner or whatever. But the Old Testament mentions it in the Mosaic Law alongside the stuff about slavery. Why are they opposed to gay marriage, but they're not opposed to slavery? Because they have picked out the parts that they like the most. And in my opinion, that goes for every religion across every culture. It doesn't matter what's in the Holy Book. What matters is what they think as a member of this religious community, what they think about it. And right now in the Middle East, specifically Saudi Arabia, Iran, and some other Middle Eastern countries, they're very far right. They're all in for controlling women's movement, their freedoms, for controlling what children do, religious beliefs. You can't burn a Quran. You can't express yourself. Very far right. So Islam is bad on text. Christianity is bad. Judaism is bad. They're all bad in the texts. But how does that manifest in the culture of the religious beliefs? Islam right now excludes more human rights than Christianity does right now within the cultures that adhere to those beliefs, in my opinion. And I think it's because Christianity had a reformation where, there's a kind of a splinter of a bunch of different beliefs and everybody kind of went their own way. Islam didn't have something like that exactly. So Islam is a much more like tightly controlled, strict top-down system, more authoritarian. Christianity was authoritarian before, Protestant split and everything, and it started to get a lot lighter after that. Anyway, that's my opinion on how they're different or whatever. Keep listening here.
It's like blasphemy.
No.
It's
an ugly
apostasy.
It's basic liberal
let me unpack it.
Tolerance.
Let me unpack it.
But not for intolerance.
No, of course not. But the picture you're painting is, to some extent, true, but is hugely incomplete.
No, I mean, Islam culturally in the Middle East is really rough.
It is certainly true that plenty of fanatics and jihadis are Muslim, but the people who are standing up to them, Malala, incredible Muhammad Ali Dadak in Iran.
Yeah, okay, yes, there are a lot of people standing up against it. I agree, but that doesn't mean that there are a lot of really bad ideas that are being implemented right now. I don't understand why that's kind of like bigoted to say.
Prison for 9 years for speaking up for Christians. A friend that I had in Pakistan who was shot this year, Rashid Rahman, for defending people accused of apostasy.
Or how about the more than 1 billion people who aren't fanatical, who don't punch women, who just want to go to school?
Wait a second. Wait a second.
Wait a second. Any of the things, but you're saying all Muslims.
Wait a second.
Wait.
I'm
not saying all
wait a
Muslims
second.
Things, and you painting the whole group religion with that.
No, let's get down to who has the right answer here. 1 billion people, you say. All these billion people don't hold any of these.
5 or something.
Don't hold these pernicious beliefs?
No,
I would.
no, they don't.
That's just not true, Ben. That's just not true.
Islam, again, is more extreme than Christianity at this moment in history, I think. And Islamic countries don't tend to value democracy in the same way that, like, a lot of the Western countries do at the moment. And, democracies have a tendency to have, like, better living conditions, more higher literacy rates and things like that. There are a lot of like Middle Eastern countries that have really good literacy rates and are really well developed and cleaned up and everything. But dictatorships tend to cause a lot of problems for people. Like people living under dictatorships, authoritarian regimes tend to be miserable, worse educated than democracies and suffering terribly. Being forced to do things, not allowed to do others. It's just not good. I prefer democracy over dictatorship. And I think that's partly what this boils down to. Islam, modern day, has been kind of molded by the authoritarian regimes that control the countries where it's most prevalent. That's what it seems like to me.
Can I just express how I think it breaks down in terms of
the idea? You haven't even defined. You're trying to say that these few people. That's all the problem is. These few bad apples. The idea that someone should be killed if they leave the Islamic.
That's horrible. That should
wait. You're saying that the idea that someone should be killed if they leave the Islamic religion is just a few bad apples?
The people who would actually believe and enact that you murder somebody if they leave Islam is not the majority of Muslims.
It is. I believe it is.
Okay, but
is it?
Let me break this down.
I mean, I don't think somebody would actually take the action to do it, but to believe it is bad enough. It's like Christians believing that atheists should die, like that they should be murdered. Would they do it? Probably not, but that is like vile to believe something like that.
We have, as you say, we have 1.5, 1.6 billion Muslims. Now,
second biggest religion in the world, a quarter.
Well, Ben, let me unpack this. Let me unpack this for you.
Please do.
We have just imagine some concentric circles here. You have at the center, you have jihadists. These are people who wake up in the morning wanting to kill apostates, wanting to die trying. They believe in paradise. They believe in martyrdom. Outside of them, we have Islamists. These are people who are just as convinced of martyrdom and paradise and wanting to foist their religion on the rest of humanity.
I believe that Sam Harris is factually correct in the things that he's saying here. I looked it up a while back, and I think that he's correct in saying that, the statistics he's about to cite, basically.
But they want to work within the system. They're not going to blow themselves up on a bus. They want to change governments. They want to use democracy against itself. Those two circles arguably are 20% of the Muslim world. Okay, this is not the
What are you
fringe of the
basing
fringe.
that research on?
A bunch of poll results that we can talk about. So to give you one point of contact, 78% of British Muslims think that the Danish cartoonist should have been prosecuted. 78%. So I'm being conservative when I roll this back to 20%.
Charlie Hebdo was a British cartoonist that depicted Islam in an unfavorable way. I don't remember what it was. Maybe they drew Muhammad. Drawing a picture of Muhammad is forbidden in the religion. It was, to my understanding, pretty offensive, but I don't even remember what it was, if I ever saw it at all. I'm not sure. But Western values say, or democratic values say, freedom of speech comes above all else. We should be allowed to speak our minds, basically. But I think that the Charlie Hebdo place, the people that drew that cartoon, they were either bombed or attacked, or there were bomb threats. I don't remember. And 78% of Muslims in the UK believed that the cartoonist should be prosecuted for drawing a picture of Muhammad. The problem is that Muslim countries control the government. Like Islam controls the government. So in Muslim countries, they really are prosecuted. They really are put in jail, stoned to death, immolated, whatever. That's one of the biggest problems. And Christianity has similar ideas about prosecuting people that break the Christian values. But at this time, when this came out, Christianity was nowhere near as insane as it is today. I mean, United States Christianity. I mean, Christian nationalists here are completely out of their heads now. I think partly because of Donald Trump, at least in part because of that. So anyway, you could say that Christianity today is about where Muslims were at that time in the UK, but I don't stand for either of those things. And honestly, I think it's like what Ben is saying. I'm sorry, what Sam Harris is saying here is about 20%. I think he's on point with that. And I also believe that about 20% of Christian nationalists, or let me rephrase, I think about 20% of Christians in the United States are just as extreme. I think that 20% are Christian nationalists, nutcases who are willing to burn everything to the ground if that's what it takes to get their way. You know, lock up atheists, deport them, or whatever.
But outside of that circle, you have conservative Muslims who can honestly look at ISIS and say that does not represent us, that we're horrified by that, but they hold views about human rights and about women, about homosexuals that are deeply troubling. So
I totally agree with this.
So these are not Islamists, they're not jihadists, but they
those views are anathema to ours.
But they also keep women and homosexuals immiserated in these cultures, and we have to empower the true reformers in the Muslim world to change it. And lying about the link between doctrine and behavior is not going to do that.
But the Great Divide.
I believe he's totally correct.
The Great Divide is not between Islam and the rest. It's rather between the fundamentalists and the moderates in each faith.
Okay, but we're misled to think that the fundamentalists are the fringe. Okay, we have jihadists, Islamists, and conservatives.
And by the way,
and again, I believe that Christianity has roughly the same concentric circles now. It's just that Christians don't control the governments in a dictatorial way in the same way that Muslim countries do right now. I think that's the key difference at the moment. They don't have as much political power.
Hundreds of millions of people fit that description.
You're saying that
this guy, I believe, Robert Steele, Richard Steele, anyway, he was the head of the RNC at one point, I believe, and he's a reasonably level-headed guy. He's not completely out of his head like others.
So you're saying that the strongest voices,
Michael Steele,
are coming from those who are jihadists and extremists. And that represents a bigger piece of the pie than we often think is true.
There's no question.
Okay, so having said that, and even if that is true statistically or otherwise, the key thing to recognize that I don't think is part of the argument, but I think should be, is that there are voices that are oftentimes raised in opposition to.
Yeah, totally. There are a lot of voices. Yes, absolutely. I'm not sure what that has to do with anything. There are a ton of voices that argue with the right-wing nutcases. That's not part of the argument? I hear people talk about that all the time in this context.
To these jihadists and to these extreme acts. But guess what? they don't get covered. They don't get exposed, and they're not given the same level of platform that we see the jihadists.
One reason they don't get exposed is because they're afraid to speak out, because it's the only religion that acts like the mafia that will kill you.
That's true, 100%. No, I mean, Christianity or Christian nationalism is like that too, but they don't have the political power to do that right now. That's the difference, I think.
If you say the wrong thing, draw the wrong picture, or write the wrong book.
So you do have,
and there's a reason why Ayaan Hirsi Ali needs bodyguards 24/7.
Dude, didn't Ayaan Hirsi Ali, didn't she turn Christian? I think she did. Wait, what? How do you spell her name? I was close. Yes, oh my God, she turned Christian. Oh my God, it was such a stupid article that she wrote. She was a Muslim, an ex-Muslim hero that would like put her life at risk and everything to argue against Islam, and deeply respectable person with respectable goals and interests. And now she's not just a Christian, but a Christian nationalist, like complete nutcase out of her head, like Trump supporting the whole nine, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I'd have to read the whole article to have the context, but anyway, yeah, it's a shame.
Element of fear as well, but you also have other braver souls out there who do.
Yes, okay. Is somebody saying that there aren't brave souls out there? I don't ever remember hearing a single person ever say that there's nobody out there in the Muslim world arguing against what's happening.
Speak out, and who who
are risking their lives to do that.
like the Muslim clerics and others.
Like, I just feel like this is vapid. They're not contributing to the conversation at all. They just want to get their words in so they have some airtime up there with Ben Affleck. Like, it's so stupid.
From Australia to Europe to the United States just recently publicly put their names on paper declaring their opposition to what ISIS and others are doing. So there are those voices, but where was the coverage? Where was
Do you think people weren't talking about like opposition to ISIS?
That story to sort of create
how's that going to help? What's that going to do? I don't understand.
A different picture.
Well, what is your solution? What is your ask?
No,
just condemn Islam?
The solution. The solution is very much what
we've killed more Muslims than they've killed us by an awful lot. We've invaded more Muslims.
I am not for more killing.
That's an interesting argument that he's giving here. I've been thinking about this a lot because I've been reading about World War II lately, and in the Nuremberg trials, at the very end, after they'd captured all of the Nazis and they were putting them on trial, they basically said, one of them, maybe Göring, somebody, I don't remember, sat up there and said, how are our concentration camps different from you dropping the atom bomb? Well, no, because that hadn't happened yet. Maybe it was the writer. Maybe it was the writer of the book that was speculating. How is it different from dropping the atom bomb than having the concentration camps? I think that might have been it, just the writer of the book. And that's an interesting question, an interesting point. I think the difference is one act was trying to bring an end to a war, while the other act was trying to kill more people. Dropping the atom bomb was horrific and honestly unnecessary. Like, by that point, Japan had pretty much already lost. If we just spent a little bit more time working at it, we wouldn't have had to have dropped the atom bomb in the first place, in my personal opinion. The reason that the atom bomb was dropped on Japan is a show of force against the Soviet Union, in my opinion. But we were working to stop killing in the end, is the point. And the Nazis were working toward killing more. So what's the difference? To tie it back to this, we've killed more Muslims than they've killed of us. What America has done is bad, evil, horrific, wrong, and disgusting. And there's no excuse for it. None. But there's a motive component here that we're talking about. And jihadists are looking for an opportunity to murder as many people as humanly possible, while Americans, even in the Iraq War, weren't ostensibly looking for an opportunity to do that, though they were wantonly killing. On paper, it was supposed to be a noble cause. So it's just more morally complicated than he's laying out. It's just more morally gray. Is all.
We've killed more Muslims than they've killed us by an awful lot. We've invaded more Muslims.
I am not for more killing.
An awful lot. And yet somehow we're exempted from these things because they're not really a reflection of.
No, we're not exempted from any of this. It's totally valid to talk about this stuff.
Somehow we're exempted from these things because they're not really a reflection of what we believe in. We did by accident. That's why we invaded Iraq and put 4 million people.
We're not convincing.
I don't agree with that at all.
Convincing anybody.
It's not specifically telling you that I disagree with what you think.
I know, and we're obviously not convincing anybody of you.
You don't understand my argument.
Your argument is like, black people, they show each other.
That is not my argument.
No, it's not. It's based on facts. I can show you a Pew poll of Egyptians.
It's interesting. He's making, this is really an argument over, seems to me, like racist tropes. That's interesting. Yeah, I'm going to have to think about this a little bit more. How is pointing out that Islam is like, a violent religion right now, how is that different from pointing out or from claiming that the black community disproportionately, there are more murders connected to the black community disproportionately to the white community or whatever? I don't even know what the figures are now. How are the two things different from each other to point those out? And I think that in one case with the black community, when people make that argument, 1350, 13% of the population commits 50% of the crime or murders or whatever, I don't know. When people present that, it's almost always neo-Nazis. And the point that they're making is that black people are genetically inferior. They are genetically prone or predisposed to violence, when that's not true. If that were the case, if it is, I don't even know if that's correct. 13% commit 50% of the crime. If it were the case, it's the result of one of two things. Either it's a genetic problem where they're just genetically like that, or it's an environmental problem that can be fixed by cleaning up communities and improving education opportunities and giving better job opportunities. It's like that because of the historic oppression in those neighborhoods and in those communities. So neo-Nazis fall on the side of they're just genetically inferior. And people with a brain fall on the side of we need to fix the communities, repair them because they've been devastated through hundreds of years of oppression and everything else. How's that different from Islam is really bad for society generally? Like they don't value human rights the same way. I think the difference is that Islam is like a self-ascribed label that people do not have to take on. And when they do take on that label, they are sending a signal. I am this thing. I'm not saying what the trope is. They are telling me what they are. I think that's the difference. It's interesting, though. It's an interesting argument that I'm going to have to think about more.
They are not outliers in the Muslim world that say like 90% of them believe death is the appropriate response to leaving the religion. If 90% of Brazilians thought that death was the appropriate response to leaving Catholicism, you would think it was a bigger deal.
I would think it's a big deal no matter what.
Okay, but that's the fact.
You don't. But what I wouldn't do is say it's all Brazilians, or I wouldn't say, well, Ted Bundy did this. Goddamn, these gays are all trying to eat each other.
Okay, let me just give you what you want. There are hundreds of millions of Muslims who are nominal Muslims, who don't take the faith seriously, who don't want to kill apostates, who are horrified by ISIS, and we need to defend these people, prop them up, and...
with Ben Affleck, I'm really considering his argument now and thinking about it. If you guys have thoughts on this, and let me know in the comments, and I'll keep a lookout. I understand his point now, I guess, by saying that it's like a race thing, that it's like genetic inferiority. I just think I disagree because Islam is like a self-ascribed label that people take on themselves. It's like a set of it's a personality package. I'm a Muslim, so I hold on to this whole package. By rote, I believe that apostates should be put to death and that it should be illegal to burn the Quran and that we shouldn't be drawing pictures of Muhammad and so on. Those are things that I believe, that I am telling you that I believe by saying that I am Muslim. That's not the same as just picking out any random black person and assuming that that person is going to commit a bunch of crimes or something. Those personality traits are not necessarily linked to individual black people. It was actually an interesting moral argument to think about. Sam is right, except it's all religion is violent, and more people in that religion will hold on to the extremism based on their violent situation. I agree. So how is it different to say the black community commits 50% of the crime and they're only 13%? I don't even know if that statistic is real or if it's accurate or whatever. I'm just using it as a ridiculous, overblown example. How is it different to say 13% of the population commits 50% of the crime? How is that different from saying Christians, a disproportionate number of Christians believe that atheists eat babies? How is that different from saying 42% of them believe that Noah's Ark was a real, literal event? I think the difference is that skin color or race is just an intrinsic quality that you are born with and that is immutable, while religion is something that you ascribe to, that you say, I am this thing, and you list out the beliefs that you hold that match up with these people. I think that's the difference. Again, if you have something more to add to it, then let me know, because this is a really interesting moral conundrum that I did not expect to come across tonight.
Let them reform. ISIS couldn't fill a AA ballpark in Charleston, West Virginia. And
hey, shout out to Charleston, West Virginia. Are there any AA ballparks there?
You were making a career out of ISIS.
But no, it's not just ISIS. It's all jihadists. It's global. It's a phenomenon of global jihad.
I think that's the opposite.
There is those things. There's ISIS. There's global jihadists. The question is the degree to which you're willing to say, because I've witnessed this behavior, which we all object to on the part of these people, I'm willing to flatly condemn those of you I don't know and have never met.
I don't look at a Muslim and assume that they are a terrorist. In fact, I look at a Muslim and assume that they are not a terrorist when I see them every single time, because it's such a small subset of the population. However, I can see Ben Affleck's argument here that in the UK, they're probably completely out of control. Like I said at the beginning, the Muslims are the immigrants, are the Mexicans of Britain. Muslims are Mexicans of Britain. So I get him saying that people tend to overgeneralize in those situations, like to a point that it's not good anymore, that it's bad, that it's not helpful, not valuable. We shouldn't be doing that. It's ridiculous. So, okay, I suppose I can get on board with both of them, I suppose, to some degree.
No, this is not condemning people. It's ideas.
And,
gotta make
and people who believe in those ideas.
So it's those people who believe
based on reality, Ben. We're not making it up. That in the Muslim world, it is mainstream belief.
But this is such a caricature of Indonesia, of Malaysia, so much of the world. And this does have the tinge a little bit of the way white racists talk about African Americans and define blacks by.
What you're saying is because they are a minority, we shouldn't criticize.
Not that much of a minority. The second biggest religion.
Okay, fine. Then the not minority. I don't know what point he's making.
Exactly, but you're treating them like a minority. But, I mean, if Filipinos were capturing teenagers and sending them into white slavery, we would criticize that. We wouldn't say, well, they're
criticize
Filipinos.
the people who are doing it, not the Philippines.
Yeah, you wouldn't say that it's inherently like intrinsic. It's part of their genetics that they are just less trustworthy. They're not good people. Like you pluck a Filipino out of the Philippines as a 2-year-old, raise them in the home of a white family in America, and it doesn't matter because they're going to grow up to be like untrustworthy and slave traders and things. That is racism, and it's ridiculous, and it's incorrect, just factually wrong. But if you pull a Christian out of the UK and raise them in a Christian nationalist nutcase family in America, I think it's totally fair to assume that they're going to believe that 42%, or I'm sorry, I think it's totally fair to assume that they're going to believe that Noah's Ark was a real literal story. The difference is a genetic argument versus an educational argument. These people are being taught this stuff, and they're openly saying, I was taught this stuff, and I am going to teach others this stuff, right?
You know what I mean?
Well, what if the people...
As a Filipino kid lives down the street from you would have nothing to do with that. So these are different things, crazy.
Racial stereotyping.
I think
All
it
right.
goes...
Let's talk... We mentioned ISIS. Let's talk about that.
Okay, anyway. I thought that was really interesting. Wow. again, I haven't seen this in like 10 years, but what an interesting moral kind of exploration. I'm just really surprised that there are people that are so like worked up about this on either side. I guess that's what happens when you have like far left and far right people clashing. And right now in the Overton window in the world, the right is just eating everything alive. They're just taking over everything. So it doesn't surprise me to find that like there are genuinely vile, hateful, racist extremists against Islam and Muslims generally. Absolutely fascinating. Let me know what you think in the comments. We'll be right back. Don't forget to check out my Patreon. Also, take a look at my website, owenmorgan.com. I just finished writing a book titled Was Hitler an Atheist? It talks about religions during the Third Reich and how they work together. Catholics, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Protestants. And I even address the lies told by the evangelical world about Bonhoeffer. It's on Audible and Amazon. This is Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert. He has gone off the deep end. He is a racist, hateful nutcase at this point. And I can't tell if he's just a bad person or if he's just been like terribly lied to. So I want to talk about some of the stuff he had to say. He's on a social media tear at the moment, but I want to step back and look at some of the stuff he said previously. This video is from February 22nd, 2023. Just listen to what he had to say here.
Well, Rasmussen poll had a provocative little poll today.
Rasmussen is really, really biased. It's a terrible, like, far-right nutcase news thing, quote unquote. Maybe they just do polling. I'm not sure if they do stuff other than polling, but it's really far-right. Anything that they do is going to be like race baiting, basically.
They said, do you agree or disagree with the statement, it's okay to be white?
This is very clearly race baiting, right? It's like, why isn't there a white pride month, quote unquote? Because white isn't an ethnicity, and it's not a minority group. You want an Irish pride month? Do it. You want a German pride month? Go nuts. You want an English pride month or an Italian pride month or a Chinese pride month? Whatever. White pride has very specific connotations. And when Rasmussen says this, they're shouting out to that. They're dog whistling to those connotations. So when somebody hears it's okay to be white, they're automatically thinking that this is like a white nationalist.
That was an actual question. Rasmussen asked, white and black voters, and probably others, do you disagree or agree with the statement, it's okay to be white?
Dude, I love that he didn't even check the methodology on this.
26% of blacks said no. It's not okay to be white.
Obviously, completely incorrect. I remember when this poll came out, and it was misrepresenting the data and creating leading questions, leading answers, and everything else. It was just a nonsensical poll. Nobody cares if you are white.
21% weren't sure. Add them together, that is 47% of black respondents were not willing to say it's okay to be white.
Okay, well, that's kind of twisting it around, but whatever. I mean, it's already twisted around.
That's like a real poll.
Not really.
This just happened. So I realized, as you know, I've been identifying as black for a while, years now.
Dude is a complete piece of trash. He's very far right, and you'll see why at the end, why I think he's completely off the rails in La La Land now. He kind of tips his hand at the end and shows us. But when he says, I've been identifying as black, he's just being a scumbag, basically, and making fun of trans people. You can identify as anything you want, You can identify as a cat. Well, I identify as black.
Because I like to be on the winning team.
Because the black people are the winners. I'm sorry, the blacks are the winners. You can't say black people, can't say black community, can't say African American. No, it's the blacks, just like in the Turner Diaries.
And I like to help. And I always thought, well, if you help the black community, that's sort of the biggest lever. You can find the biggest benefit. So I thought, well, that's the hardest thing and the biggest benefit.
Oh, so You telling me that you've been trying to use the black community to further your own goals and interests, and the moment it seems like you can't benefit from the black community, you just walk away from it and say, "F them"? Am I reading this correctly? Nope. Sorry. Wrong sound effect. I didn't mean to give you that one. I meant this one.
Stop it. Get some help.
So I'd like to focus a lot of my life resources in helping black Americans. So much so that I started identifying as black to just be on the team I was helping. But it turns out that nearly half of that team doesn't think I'm okay to be white.
Again, like it didn't say it's not okay to be white. Even the poll, he's twisting the poll, which was already twisted. He said 20-something% said it's not okay, and then another 20-something% said not sure. Even if we're assuming the poll is correct and honest, which it isn't, he's misrepresenting an already dishonest poll. This is how things get completely distorted and twisted up into a mess with things like this right here.
Think I'm okay to be white, which is, of course, why I identified as black, so I could be on the winning team for a while. But I have to say, this is the first political poll that ever changed my activities. I don't...
Something tells me that's not true.
know that that's ever happened before. Normally you see a poll, you just look at it, you go, whatever. Oh, this is interesting what other people think. But as of today, I'm going to re-identify as white because I don't want to be a member of a hate group. I'd accidentally joined a hate group.
He thinks that black people are a hate group. This is vile.
So if nearly half of all blacks are not okay with white people, according to this poll, not according to me.
No, that's not what the poll said. Do you know that he's an atheist, famously, and a member of Mensa and all kinds of other things? Like, in another universe, we would agree. He would be on our side, generally, politically and logically and religiously. But he is just off in La La Land somewhere else that I don't even know where he is now. His head is just gone. So I talked about the Turner Diaries recently, so I'm not going to rehash this, but this is the exact thing that the Turner Diaries lays out. It's the white nationalist, like the Nazi playbook. They say that, I'm going to put this in the Turner Diaries clip too. Genocides have to be planned. They're not spontaneous. It's not something where you just you go out and, you wreak havoc or whatever. Like Crystal Knot, the Night of Broken Glass, where people rioted in Germany and burned down synagogue and stuff. That happens, but that's not a genocide because it's not organized. It's just haphazard. And they're not seeking people out specifically and setting up like a full bureaucracy and organization to bring an end to people's lives. Genocide or holocausts, they have to be planned. The Turner Diaries is the plan. That's the plan. It was written to be the plan. So anyway, what he's laying out here is straight out of the Turner Diaries, this kind of thing right here. Black people are not okay with white people. They want to hurt white people. They hate white people. We are the persecuted minority in the country, and we have to do something about it. Straight out of the Turner Diaries.
And I don't want to have anything to do with them. And I would say, based on the current way things are going, the best advice I would give to white people is to get the hell away from black people. Just get the f*** away. Wherever you have to go, just
Yeah, great idea. Segregate, self-segregate. Awesome.
Get away. Because there's no fixing this. This can't be fixed. Right? This can't be fixed.
The next step after saying this can't be fixed is the Turner Diaries, is a race war. That's the only solution if you believe that something can't be fixed, is changing it by force. This is psychotic. I'm not sure Scott Adams is following the Turner Diaries. I know that at least some people are, like Joel Webb, and I'm pretty convinced of that. I think Scott Adams is probably a true believer. I think that he's just gone down a completely ass-backward road that leads to nothing but hate.
You just have to escape. So that's what I did. I went to a neighborhood where, I have a very low black population. So I think it makes no sense whatsoever as a white citizen of America to try to help black citizens anymore. It doesn't make sense. It's no longer a rational impulse. And so I'm going to...
So you only want to help black people if it benefits you. Just reaffirming what he already said. Got it. You're not helping people to help them. You're helping them to help you.
I'm going to back off from being helpful to black America.
He was never helpful.
Because it doesn't seem like it pays off. Like I've been doing it all my life, and the only outcome is I get called a racist.
Why are you being called a racist? Again, this is right out of Turner Diaries too. They said that was the basis for jailing people in the Turner Diaries because they were being racist. You know, a girl says that she doesn't want to be taken advantage of, and she's slapped across the face by her mom and called racist. This is all straight out of the book. I have to wonder if he's read it.
The only outcome is I get called a racist. That's the only outcome. It makes no sense to help black Americans if you're white. It's over. Don't even think it's worth trying. And I'm also...
Again, solution when you reach that point in Scott Adams' head is race war. This is psychotic. And this next section kind of tips his hand. It kind of reveals like where he is in his head and in social media, shows what he's seeing.
And I'm also really sick of seeing video after video of black Americans beating up non-black citizens.
What are you talking about? Where are you seeing these videos? Are these even real? There are statistically probably in the past 12 months, at least a few cases of a Latino beating up a white person or a black person or a Chinese person beating up a Japanese person or whatever. Like there are people that beat other people up all the time. When you cherry pick those examples, find every example you can of black people beating up white people and post it to a Telegram channel, for example, and that's all you post, just those pictures, you're giving your audience a skewed understanding of the situation. It's no more prevalent than any other people beating up anybody else. It's not a problem that exists in society, like at all. And the fact that he's seeing this tells me that he is on basically neo-Nazi and white nationalist forums, like Telegram channels and websites. That is the only way he'd come across something like this. Like an echo chamber that only feeds him that.
I realize it's anecdotal.
Really? It's anecdotal, you say? Wow.
And it doesn't give me a full picture of what's happening. But every damn day I look on social media and there's some black person beating the shit out of some white person.
And that didn't tip you off that maybe you're stuck in an echo chamber? You know, there's something called an epistemic bubble that's different from an echo chamber. An epistemic bubble is like when you're on Facebook and all of your Facebook friends are like Trump supporters. So most of the things you see on your Facebook wall is just pro-Trump stuff. You're not locked into this one media source, and you're not like turning off all other media sources or anything. This is just what you happen across. You're not being forced into reading anything. An echo chamber is different in that it's commonly created intentionally, and people are discouraged from or just don't want to find information outside of it. When people say echo chamber, usually they mean epistemic bubble. This is an actual case of an echo chamber, it seems to me.
I'm kind of over it. I'm over it. Right? So I quit.
We're going to feel the loss of Scott Adams' help for the blacks, quote unquote, as he said. Give me a break, bro. Come on. I mean, Scott Adams is also famous for, well, in my, opinion, he's also famous for creating conspiracy theories knowingly and intentionally. He says, I'm an atheist, but I'm seeing 666 all over Joe Biden's campaign. That's weird, right? I don't believe in any of it. I'm just saying this is how Satan would operate. This is very clearly him just being a colossal scumbag, seems to me. Anyway, tell me what you think about it in the comments. This guy is just low. Just low. That's all I've got for you. If you like what I do and you want to see me continue to do it, don't forget to check me out on Patreon. I just finished writing a book titled Was Hitler an Atheist? It talks about religions during the Third Reich and how they work together. Catholics, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Protestants. And I even address the lies told by the evangelical world about Bonhoeffer. It's on Audible and Amazon. Okay, thanks for watching, guys.